Henry M. Robert of the United States Army had a problem. General Henry M. Robert was what you would call a joiner. The United States Army sent him all over the United States in the 19th century, and wherever he went, he liked to join church groups, civic groups, fraternal societies. He was a joiner. In German, you would say a Vereinsmensch. But he noticed that there was no uniform way of conducting business, and this disturbed him. And the straw that broke the general's back, so to speak, was when he presided over a meeting in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is on the coast, and the issue was, should we build a seawall in front of this town? Now this affected people very directly because the people lived from fishing, they lived from commerce, from shipping. This really had an impact on their lives. So in best New England tradition, they called for a town meeting. So imagine the town hall of the church packed with the townspeople. Each one had an agenda. Each one had an opinion, an interest in this question. General Robert is presiding. The meeting lasted
11 hours.
And at the end of those 11 hours, imagine this. Nobody knew what was decided. And even worse, nobody even knew whether anything had been decided at all. It was chaos, total chaos pure. Now, I'm sure all of us have sat through meetings like this, maybe not 11 hours, but when you came out, you thought, what was the issue? What did we decide? Who's responsible? We don't know. That cannot, should not happen with parliamentary procedures. This meeting inspired General Robert to sit down one long winter in 1876 and write a manual of order. It's now known as Robert's Rules of Order. It's now in the 10th edition. And we use it now for guiding us through large meetings where there is a possible of conflict. It's a way of handling things quickly, swiftly, but fairly and transparently. Now, where can you use parliamentary procedures? I would say in a Toastmasters board meeting with 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 7 people, may not be necessary. At work, if you've got a working group of 4 people, probably not necessary to use parliamentary procedures because things can move faster without them. But imagine a group this size, or even better yet, something that's really going to affect us. District 59, we're part of District 59, continental Europe, will meet in a little over 2 months in Poland, in Poznan. They will have a business meeting. That is the whole reason for having these conferences twice a year. It's a business meeting on Saturday morning. At this business meeting, the Continental Council is going to describe, District 59 is going to decide how we're going to split because we're too big. Now, do you think there might be diversified viewpoints on this question? Do you think there might be controversy there? You better believe there will be. And if that meeting is not run according to parliamentary procedures, it's going to be chaos. It will never end, and there'll be no upshot. What we're going to do tonight is the first of 5 sessions. We're going to talk about the principles. We're going to talk a little bit about what's behind those principles. In the 4th, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th, we'll get more into detail about parliamentary procedures. Tonight's just a general overview. I should mention that Robert's Rules of Order are the most common ones used in the United States. There are other rules of parliamentary procedure as well. You can see in the word Parliament, yes, there is the Westminster Rule of Order as well, which the British Parliament uses. They developed those for a very good reason, because in the 17th and 18th century, the good old days, there were often fights in Parliament, physical brawls, because people couldn't disagree or agree or thought they were being treated unfairly. However, it isn't just confined to quaint examples of 17th and 18th century. I'm sure you can find on YouTube a video of the Japanese Parliament. I mean, can you imagine the Japanese, the most polite people on earth today? In the late 1990s, there was a fist fight in the Japanese Parliament because chaos had broken out in a meeting. This cannot happen with parliamentary procedures. It should not happen with parliamentary procedures because, again, they are fair and they are transparent. Let's talk about some of the basics, the premises. Votes of the members are counted equally and only once. No member can vote twice, and each member has only one vote. That's the foundation of parliamentary procedures. Absent members and members who are in the minority do have some rights. Another principle. Members have the right to free and fair debate. They have a right to know, what are we debating? What is the question? They have a right to know what will the effect be on me and on the organization. That's a right of membership. This one I have to underline a little bit. The majority has the right to decide. I know it's been fashionable the last 40 years ago to somehow take pity on the minority, but the minority does not decide under parliamentary procedures. The minority has a right to make its viewpoint known and has a right to protest, but does not carry the decision. The majority carries the decision. I have to emphasize that again and again. Finally, parliamentary procedures facilitate goodwill because it's based on fairness and fair play. Why should you, as Toastmasters, be interested in learning parliamentary procedures? I can think of two and a half reasons. Reason number one, Toastmasters, where leaders are made, our new motto. You may have to run a meeting someday, a large meeting where you have to get through an agenda quickly and effectively and fairly. If you know how to use parliamentary procedures, that's a wonderful management tool. Now, the bad news is parliamentary procedures. Can I have my bag there for a second? Parliamentary procedures is an extremely complex and complicated subject. It is taught at universities, in law schools, as graduate degrees, not for undergraduate, but for graduate lawyers, and not every lawyer understands it. You go through books like this. It's extremely complicated. That's the bad news. The good news is, to run a meeting, you don't have to know all this. You don't have to know all the detail. I don't know all the detail. It suffices to have a broad understanding of how it works. To underscore what I'm telling you, I have gone to 12 international Toastmasters conventions in Canada or the United States. The Saturday of convention week is always devoted, the Friday morning is devoted to the Toastmaster business meeting. 2,000 Toastmasters in a room. Up front, leading, is the president of Toastmasters International. No one expects him to be an expert in parliamentary procedures. No one expects it because directly at his right hand, literally next to him, is Herb Knowles, the official Toastmasters parliamentarian. He knows the answers. Not the president of Toastmasters. He doesn't have to. If he has a question, he quickly confers with Herb, or Herb quickly confers with him, and the meeting runs smoothly, fairly, transparently. You don't need to. I'll take questions at the end, okay? Incidentally, Herb Knoll, I've known him for several years. My wife was afraid of him. He wears these owl-like glasses, old man like me, but a bit shorter, older, never smiles. Privately, he's one of the funniest people you ever want to meet, and he's a parliamentarian, an official, professional parliamentarian. So you don't have to know this to run a meeting. A broad understanding is enough to get you through most situations. And if it's really big, like in Poznan, our Polish meeting, there should be a parliamentarian up there helping our district governor. Reason number two you should know, if you're not leading the meeting, chances are you're in the audience participating as a voting member. It's good to know what your rights are under parliamentary procedures. It's good to know the tools at your disposal. Know how to use them and also know how not to use them. Some people abuse these tools because they don't really understand parliamentary procedures. But if you understand parliamentary procedures, you can get a lot more out of your meetings. I said two reasons, maybe 2.5 reasons. The half reason is you could also become a parliamentarian. Now, people seem to think I'm an expert in it. When I go to meetings, guess whom they ask to be the parliamentarian? Me with my little book. Yeah. I expect when I retire, I might even make a sort of a second profession out of it, become a professional parliamentarian. Could be kind of a nice way to supplement my retirement income. Let's get down to some basic definitions. I'll put in my CD now, and here we go. PowerPoint. First definition is a quorum. Our Toastmasters Club, I think, has about 35 members, doesn't it? Could you imagine if, let's say, Mel, I, and Carolyn got together, just the three of us, after a meeting and decided, we're going to change the name of the club, we're going to double the dues, and we're going to move our meeting space to somewhere out in Gemini. Can we do it? No, because we don't constitute a quorum. We are not a large enough number of people to decide. Any assembly should have in its constitution or in its bylaws a definition of what is a quorum. In our case, we get a constitution from California which tells us a quorum for a Toastmasters Club is half of the active members. If you've got fewer than the half of the active members, you do not have a quorum in a Toastmasters meeting, in the Toastmasters Club. In Poznan, different rules apply because that's a district conference there. Constitution. This club has a constitution. Constitution tells you the name of the organization, the purpose of the organization, who's a member, who's not a member, and maybe the officers. Who are the officers of this organization? You have things called bylaws, which say this club shall be run under Robert's Rules of Order. When does a member cease to be a member? When can a club get rid of a member, if necessary? Those are in the bylaws. Then you have something called the standing rules. The standing rules are more administrative. In Germany, we would call it Verwaltungsrecht. Standing rule, for example, this club, the Munich Toastmasters, meets the first and the third Wednesday of every month. You could change that if you want to the first and third Tuesday, or meet once a month. Those are standing rules which you could change. Big definition now. A motion. A motion. A main motion. This is the heart of parliamentary procedures. A motion is a proposal that the club should do something. A member can bring a motion only when there is no other business in front of the club. I think that idea, that concept should be clear. You can only work on one thing at a time. You can only focus on one problem at a time. So when the table is clear, there's no other pending business, a member can bring forth a motion. I move, that's the verb, I move that the club buy a data projector for itself. Here. Final definition we're going to give you is presiding officer. The person up front leading the meeting. The presiding officer is a member of the assembly, is a voting member of the assembly. Often it's the president, could be Daria, it could be a vice president, could be Carolyn, or it could be somebody else from the club like me who's not an officer but who is leading the meeting. That's your presiding officer. This is your traffic patrolman, your traffic cop who's directing. Everything flows over the presiding officer. One of the wonderful things about parliamentary procedure, nobody's allowed to talk until recognized by the presiding officer. The presiding officer shouldn't do all the talking, but nobody's allowed to just blurt out anything. If they do, it doesn't go into the record, it's not taken down, it's not official. You are out of order by doing that. So one person speaks at a time. There's more to that role. We'll talk about it later. I said the motion, the main motion, is the heart of parliamentary procedures. For most people, for most clubs, it is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-step procedure. 6 steps to handling a motion. Step number 1, no pending business on the table. A member, any voting member, asks to be recognized. from the chair. The chairman recognized, can raise his hand, could stand up. Once he's recognized, the member can say, I move that the club buy a data projector. Now, when you make a motion like this, it should be very clear. It should be the who, the what, the when, and if it involves money, also the how much. So let's say I move that the club should buy next month a data projector, cost not to exceed 400 euros. That is a good, clear motion. Yeah? Any member has a right to bring one if there's no other business pending. Step one. That was step one. Is it a viable motion yet? Nope. Because now, somebody in the room has to say, I second the motion. Or simply, second. And here's one of the few times in a parliamentary meeting where you don't have to be recognized by the chair. Anybody can just yell out, second, perfectly okay. Now, the person who seconds a motion is usually in favor of it, but not necessarily. Maybe all that person is saying, I think this is something we should talk about. I think this is something we should vote on. Usually the person is in favor, but maybe the person will change his mind during the debate. Yeah, quite possible. But the whole purpose of this is, if only one person in the room is interested in the topic and nobody else, if there is no second, let's not waste our time, our valuable time talking about this. People do have their individual agendas. Let's not waste the whole group's time. But if two people find it good, it's valid. That's step number two, the second. Step number 1, 2, 3. Now something magical happens here. The meeting chairman, the presiding officer, states the motion to the assembly so that everybody hears it and that everybody understands it. And sometimes you have to be a little sensitive here because people, I'm assuming a non-Toastmasters audience, are not always that articulate. So if the motion comes through kind of unclear, as a presiding officer, you can ask the person, can we say it this way? Can we reformulate this? Be careful not to change the original idea, but try to help the person formulate a clear motion. Once the presiding officer formulates the motion in front of the group, that's when the magic happens. It was, let's say Gerhard made a motion to buy that data projector. That was his idea. He brought it in, somebody seconded it. Now, it's no longer Gerhard's idea. You can't say, I don't think it's a good idea, I'll take it back. Too late. It belongs to the assembly now. It's our property. You can change it only if we say you can, because it becomes our property now. It's our ball. We have to run with it. So the presiding officer states the motion. That's the third point. Fourth point, fourth step. Now is the fun part. You open the debate as the presiding officer. Let's assume that Gerhard made the proposal, the motion, to buy a data projector. I would, as presiding officer, then ask Gerhard, would you like to speak in favor of the motion? You have the first right to speak if you want. And you probably do have your reasons for making that motion. After Gerhard's finished, I scan the room, or you scan the room as presiding officer, and see if there's anybody opposed to Gerhard's motion. There may be. Or you could even ask, is anyone opposed to the room? Please raise your hand, because that next person has the chance to speak. And then it goes back and forth. For, against, pro, con. Technically, no one should speak twice before another person has had a chance to speak. So if Gerhard, you speak in favor of your motion, the next person to speak in favor of your motion should be somebody else, unless there is nobody else, and then you can get a chance, again, to speak. That was the fourth step, the debate. It's fair, everybody gets a chance to speak. When there is no more debate, when it's apparent everybody has said what they want to say, then I ask as chairman, are you ready for the question, or are you ready to vote on the motion? Yeah? Now, there are different ways to vote. You could use a voice vote. All those in favor of buying a data projector say aye. Yeah, aye. All those opposed say nay. It's called a voice vote. Not too efficient, because if it's 50-50, who's to say? You could do a hand vote. Raise your hand. All people in favor, raise your hand. As presiding officer, you must also ask all people against. Raise your hand. Even if you see a sea of hands in front of you, it's obvious the motion has passed, you must still ask, who is opposed? You have to ask a third question as presiding member as well. Are there any abstentions? Now, there are a number of reasons why you may not want to vote. Maybe you don't have enough information. Maybe you're indifferent. So I say, abstention. I don't vote. My vote will not be considered in this. So 3 questions. Who's in favor? Who's opposed? And who's abstaining? Those 3 things. Other ways to vote. You could have a written ballot. Yeah, and then the secretary counts them afterwards. You can have a secret ballot on sensitive questions where people don't want to know don't want let other people know how they vote. Or you can have a roll call vote, which means every person, individually, how do you vote? How do you vote? How do you vote? You're a member of the assembly, how do you vote? And each vote is recorded according to person. You could even have what they call a division of the assembly, where it's not clear whether there's a majority. All those in favor, go over to this side of the room. All those opposed, go over to that side of the room. And you sort of do a body count. And whoever has the majority wins the motion. Interesting thing about voting as a presiding officer. As I said, the presiding officer is a member of the assembly. I'm a member of this club. I have a right to vote too. But as a presiding officer, I only vote if my vote will make a difference in the outcome. And I'll tell you where that will happen. Let's say 18 are in favor of buying a data projector. 18 are opposed to buying a data projector. If I don't think it's a good idea as a presiding officer, I do nothing. Because a tie vote defeats the motion. According to parliamentary procedure, if it's a tie, the motion dies. So I do nothing if I don't think we should buy the projector. If the vote is 17 in favor and 14, or whatever it is, 16 opposed, and I'm in favor of buying it, I do nothing. Because the majority wins. They don't need my vote to tip the scales. But if it's 17-16, and I don't think it's a good idea, then I can vote as presiding member, because then it makes a tie, 17-17, the motion is defeated. So that's when a presiding officer is allowed to vote. That was the fifth step, taking the vote. Final step, step number 6. This is an American 6, by the way. This is an American 1, right? You do that in Canada too?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Except for the hockey players,
Yeah.
Step number 6, presiding officer gives instructions. He announces the results. 17 were in favor, 14 were opposed. The motion is carried. Or 17 were opposed, 14 were in favor. The motion is defeated. He announces the results and then gives instructions. What is to be done? Let's say the club decides, yes, we will buy that data projector. Then the presiding officer instructs the treasurer to go and purchase the data projector at a cost not to exceed 400 euros. And that's how a motion moves. I want to use just about 3 more minutes now for a sample run. Who would like to make it? This does not count. We're not binding the club on anything. But make a simple motion, suggestion. Gee, I wish I had a data projector. Would anyone like to make a motion? There's no pending business. Yes, sir.
Well, I move that the club buys a data projector not exceeding the value of 1,500 euros.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Here's where the magic, I'm going to do my magic trick now. It has been moved and seconded that the club buy a data projector at a value not to exceed 1,500 euros. Now, it's no longer your baby, it's our baby. I open the floor to discussion. Would you like to speak on the motion?
Considering that the highest quality of speeches has to be provided in this club, I think it's best that we buy a very expensive one.
Sir, are you opposed?
Yeah,
Sir?
as an officer, I just had a look at how much money we have, and we can't afford 1,500. I think we would be able to afford 500 euros.
Ma'am, are you in favor?
No, but I would like to make another motion. Can I make another motion now?
That's advanced. That's advanced technique. We'll get into that next
I have a
week.
very good one. I move that all non-club members stay a small fee for joining us so we can buy the data projector.
No, we'll get to that. That's next week's top, or 2 weeks from now. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the motion?
Only in favor.
Well, because we haven't opposed anyone in favor now. Anyone like to speak against the motion? Sir?
I'm in favor.
Bart?
I'm in favor.
In favor.
Yeah, so I want to say is we need a good data projector because we need a high-end Lumi so that we can get a clear picture on the wall, and we have to spend money for it.
Okay.
So no one will get a help when we can't see anything on the wall.
I will ask one more person against, and then we have to proceed for time. Yeah. Who's against?
I'm against.
Sean, are you against?
Yes.
Oh, well, let him go first. Yeah.
Well, I think that from taking into consideration the size of our rooms, the present technology available, and the second-hand market, we could find a data projector that would be great for our needs, well under 200 euros.
Okay, at this
Well
point,
under 250.
because of time, we have to close the debate, so I will now proceed, assuming there are no more, I have to assume there are no more debates here, proceed to a vote. The question is, the club should buy a data projector in value not to exceed 1,500 euros. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 3 are in favor. All those who are opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. A sea of hands. All those who are abstaining, who abstains? There are 2 abstentions. The motion is defeated. Is there any other business? That's how you do parliamentary. That's all for today's lesson. In 2 weeks, we will get into the fine points about amending a main motion. That happens very often. It can be very confusing. But that's it for this lesson. I thank you for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed the visuals.